Welcome back to episode 5 of the Next is Now podcast. This is Max Feldman. Thank you all for tuning in. After hitting on the debut of 2027 rankings last week and then walking through the big themes with updates for the other 3 high school classes, today we're going to the other end of the ladder. I've got Tony Mcniff coming on here shortly, and we're going to talk all things class of 2023. Let's get right into it. Welcome on, Tony Mcniff. How we doing?
Good. How about you, bro?
Doing good. Looking forward to getting into this conversation after seems like a few months now of just going in deep on 2024, 5, 2026, and 7 now at this point. So nice to get back to the 2023 guys, get a chance to look ahead to the college basketball season as well. So here to start this conversation, we're going to get into a few different things, just breaking down the class, looking at whether it's draft stuff, looking at guys who are going to exceed expectations, storylines. First, we're going to get into a 2024 NBA draft, way too early big board. We're going to switch off picks, break down some guys that we like. Obviously, way too early here to get a grip on too much of what the draft's going to look like and stuff like that. But want to just take a look at some early guys. So to start here, we're going to go 1 through 14, just the lottery for now. I'm going to have you start. Got to have the guest start here, make that first pick, and then we'll switch off from there. Let's talk about a bunch of these different guys. So go ahead with the first overall pick.
For first pick, I'd probably have to go with 𝘼thletes at this point. I just love the upside with him. I think G League Ignite was the best move for him as well. I think it gives him a better chance to work on his body as well. But if I had to go number 1, I'd probably take him at this point.
Totally. That makes sense. I think a guy that's definitely being slotted in that territory early on seemed like he's risen throughout the back end of his high school career, and especially when you start talking about pro stuff, he's just a guy that kind of jumps off the group just in terms of pro projection. I agree. I think G League's a great route for him. That seemed like pretty straightforward back into like his junior, getting into the last EYBL year. That like this is a guy that could struggle a little bit in college basketball just with the physicality, the half court stuff. So I think playing in the G League is going to be great for him, and obviously it's a really strong G League group. For the second pick, staying in that G League group as well, going to go with Ron Holland, probably a guy that I would have gone with first. Just a guy that obviously consistency's been a bit of a question mark getting into his senior year and last EYBL summer, but I think a guy that his game just fits really well at the highest level, and I think a guy that scouts, front offices are going to feel really comfortable with in a draft that maybe is a little bit more shaky, maybe not trying to swing and miss on some of these guys at the top that have some questionable ceilings and some pretty low floors potentially. So I think Ron Holland's a guy that has a really safe floor, but I think also is going to be super valuable in the league just with his two-way stuff, how hard he plays. He's won at every level. So I think he's a guy that going into this way too early mock draft, a guy that you have to feel pretty strongly about at the top.
Definitely.
Moving on to the third overall pick here. Who you got?
Third, I would probably go with Isaiah Collier, who will be at USC this year. I believe he finished at number 1 in our 2023, correct?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, we were obviously really high on him. Big thing with him is he's obviously always been known as a really good athlete, downhill playmaker, has a great feel, but I think he really improved overall as a scorer in the past year or two as well. But he's a kid I'd feel pretty confident about going in, and I'd say the top 5 or 10 next year.
Yeah, I think that's a good one. Obviously, a guy we finished really highly on, so belongs in that territory. I think with him, it's going to be really interesting to see the shooting. I think the big thing for me evaluating him, especially around like really other high level guys, whether it was UIBL or high school, like obviously you're going to play against some other guys, but when you're in a like it was Elite 24 and some other events where he was around all elite guys, sometimes to create separation. And if he wasn't making his shots, it was really tough for him to like. I think he's at his best when he's in the pick and roll. He's getting downhill, full rotation. He's going to make the right read every time. But if he's not knocking down shots and kind of has that shooting gravity to pull out the defense, I think he can struggle sometimes to create separation, make plays for others, and make plays for himself sometimes. So I think the Pac-12 is a good spot for him. I think he's in a good situation playing around some other guards as well. But really interested to see how that shooting, whether it stays at the same clip he was during high school, which was shaky. Um, and I think sometimes, especially early in this year, some people have slotted him as maybe too high of a level of a shooter than maybe he was during high school. So I think that's the big question mark, but definitely has all the opportunity to get there.
For sure.
Fourth pick, I'm going to go with a big riser late in high school, and I think it's something that's super important with this high school stuff, this early mock draft stuff in general, and seeing how these one and done guys hit the ground running potentially. I'm going to go with Marco Jackson, a guy that I know you both like, and I think a guy that is going to be playing on one of the best teams in the country, maybe the best team in the country. And I think just has all the opportunity to be the big riser in this class. Really good two-way guard. He's kind of the modern combo guard where he's makes the right read, is a pretty good playmaker, but he's also going to knock down shots. I think that's been the big impressive thing with him late in high school. It's just his consistency as a shooter, and I think there's even another level to hit there. Obviously, probably my favorite perimeter defender in the class is long and strong, physical, like really tough. So I'm excited to see more of him, and I think it's a really good fit. Obviously, playing around a lot of talent and kind of has to carve out some playing time early on, playing on such a good roster with Kevin McCullough, DeJuan Harris, like really good veteran players. But I think it's kind of an X factor in this class overall.
Definitely. I'm super high on him too. Like him a lot.
Yeah. Number 5 here.
Another guy I'm super high on is Stephon Castle, and I think he's going to surprise some people this year. I think he's going to have a great opportunity to step into a role with UConn. Obviously, the team is coming off a national championship. They did lose a couple guys, but overall, they're bringing back a good amount of talent with Alex Karaman, Donovan Clingan. But he played well on their international trip, and obviously, he's just a big guard and it's hard to come across that blend of size and feel too often. Has good intermediate touch, and I think there's a lot of upside for him to still tap into as well.
Yeah, totally. And I think we're going to get into some intriguing freshman storylines later on after this. And I think the UConn freshmen are one of the big ones, coming off a national championship with some veterans, like really strong mix of role players plus some of the best players in the country. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how those freshmen fit in. And obviously, one of the best classes in the country coming in. So I don't think talent's a question mark, but that group last year was so cohesive. So I'm intrigued to see how a guy like Castle fits in.
Definitely.
I think the big thing with him, and I was a little bit lower on him, is just the shooting. I think there's similar to Collier, honestly.
Yeah.
Guy who's really good when he's creating that advantage, living out of the mid-range, finishing at the rim. But if he doesn't have that gravity at the three-point line, I think it's going to be tough. And obviously a guy that's used to having the ball in his hand. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how that fits. I think he could be a guy that like kind of takes off over the second half of the year, but could struggle a little bit at first. So, but yeah, it's like a jumbo ball handler, guy who can really defend, great athlete. I think the NBA fit and like idea of him is definitely there.
For sure.
For 6 here, going back to the G League pool, going to Izan Almansa, guy who's been playing with Overtime Elite for a few years. Originally from Spain, been super dominant in FIBA stage, like every step of the way. I think he's a really good NBA fit just in terms of like a combo 4-5, can kind of play either spot. I think he's probably best as a 5, but just really good on the boards, really dynamic as a roll man, can really finish around the rim. Moves better than most guys his size. So I'm intrigued. I'm excited to see more of that group overall because it's like kind of a group that they haven't rolled out before. It's a lot of guys like 6'7" to 6'9" that can do a bunch of different things, but also like the idea of that is great and it gets people excited, but sometimes it doesn't always work and it's really tough to score in the half court. So I'm excited to see more of it, but Almansa's been a guy that's just produced at every stage. And I think if he does figure out the shooting, if he does figure out like adds a little bit more to his offensive game, I think he's a guy that can push top 5 here. So yeah, excited to see more of him.
For sure, definitely.
Number 7 here.
Seven. It's actually a guy I wasn't too familiar with until about a month or so ago. But I'm gonna go with 𝘼aximizing, who's gonna be at UCLA this upcoming year. They have a ridiculously talented class as well, with a couple of talented 2023s and like Sebastian Mack, Brandon Williams, a couple other guys. Then they're also have a huge crop of international talent. But with Mara, it's really just he's 7'3", shows floor spacing flashes, can pass it a little bit, and just the overall mix of size and skill is really appealing. And I think that there's a ridiculously high ceiling for him to tap into. And I'm intrigued to see how him and Bona play together.
Totally. And I'm not going to get into it too much because this is one of my most intriguing storylines, just this class in general, headed to
Hmm.
UCLA. I think it's fascinating. So we're going to save that. But yes, I like 𝘼aximizing a ton. Number 8 here, I'm going with another riser, one of my favorite guys in the class. It's 𝘿evelopment. Obviously, very high here, but we finished with him as a top. Let's see, we finished with him at 12 overall,
Yeah.
obviously way higher than anyone in the recruiting industry. So a guy that we're pretty high on, and I think it's really to me just his senior year at SoCal Academy. Really at the beginning of the year started as like a 2 guard off guard. They kind of took the ball and they took the ball out of someone else's hands, put it in 𝘿's hands, and I think it really unleashed like another developmental level for him. A
Hmm.
guy that was big time flashes before that, elite backcourt defender, and showed big flashes when he was on the ball, but never really had the opportunity. And over that back half of his senior year, they put the ball in his hands, and the reward was awesome. Just super productive and also showed a ton more as a playmaker, showed he could really see the floor. And the big thing with those guys who are super fast twitch and explosive is like, can they decelerate? Can they make the right reads? Can they play in traffic? And he showed a ton of that, and also shot the ball really well. So heading to Providence, obviously a new regime at Providence. So it's going to be interesting to see how everything falls into place there. But a guy that really jumps off the board just in terms of NBA fit as a combo guard. And obviously going to have to put on a ton of strength, going to have to continue staying in that weight room. But a guy that I think NBA scouts will be be pretty intrigued by pretty early on there.
For sure. I love him long term, definitely.
Number 9 here, who you got?
Honestly, guy wasn't too high coming out of high school, but I've honestly grown to like him a lot in recent weeks after the buzz I've heard and what I've seen from him, and that's Baylor's Jacoby Walter. So he played really well on their international trip. He's just a pure shot maker, really good scorer, can fill it up, great spot up shooter. Obviously there's still room to grow defensively and as a playmaker, but just the consistent shot making and just the way that Scott Drew lets his guards play, and I think that he could really make some big noise for them this year.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you hit on the two big things there. It seems like a guy in this like archetype of like a bucket getting wing with good size, really explosive, can really fill it up. I feel like
Hmm.
one of those guys rises every year, and then it seems like every year a Baylor guy is just like the
Yeah, definitely.
loads into the lottery, whether he was slotted there or he jumps into that mix.
Hmm.
So I think that one makes sense. I think the big thing with Walter for me is the decision making. Just been a
Hmm.
guy who's been prone to taking some tough shots.
Yeah.
Used to like having the ball in his hands and hasn't been the best playmaker, most efficient playmaker sometimes for other guys. I
Hmm.
think Baylor did a good job with Keontae George with that last year. They've done a good job with other guys in the past. So I think it'll be interesting to see how he settles in. I think another guy that like could be a little streaky at first, but a guy that once he figures it out, obviously has the size, athleticism, and can really shoot it off the dribble. So that's a good one there for sure. The 10 spot here, I'm going to go with another UCLA guy. I'm going to go with Jan Vide. I think a guy that isn't talked about as much as some of the other UCLA guys and some of these freshmen coming in general. And I think it's a little bit different of a bet than a lot of these guys where it's like some of these guys that we've talked about already is the highest level projection for them is kind of like a role player guy. I think
Hmm.
Jan Vide is a little bit different where he's more of like a creator bet, a guy that you put the ball in his hands because that's been something he's been used to. And I think that's kind of the big thing with him that I'm intrigued to see is like he's had the ball in his hands a lot every step of the way. Hasn't always been the most efficient. He's had some turnover stuff, different points of his career in Europe. So I'm really intrigued to see how he fits into college basketball, but like so skilled, incredible feel for the game. Really good, like kind of has that Luka Doncic type of game where he's like really good with the ball in his hands, doesn't have crazy tools, but can shoot it off the dribble, has fantastic pace, knows how to use his body, can make plays for other guys. So really interested to see how he fits in early, but I think has so much talent. If he can figure out the efficiency and playing off ball a little bit more, I'm excited to see.
Yeah, he's a good one.
Number 11 here, getting the back end.
Okay. I'm gonna go with Duke's Jared McCain here. Honestly, when he was maybe junior, so I never really saw a ton of NBA upside with him right away. But he's just a guy who just has consistently gotten better. He's super fundamentally sound. He may not be the most elite athlete, but he makes up for it with his shot making IQ and just his overall approach to the game. And I think the buzz on him has all been really positive this summer. I heard he was one of the best guards at CP3 Academy, played well at Nike Skills Academy as well. So I think there's just a ton to like there with him. And obviously, I think Duke's gonna have a big decision to make with Roach and Proctor coming back on whether or not they're gonna do a three guard lineup. But regardless of whether McCain, maybe if he's in a six-man role to start, I think he's just gonna provide a big impact early on for them with all
No,
the
no,
attention and people they have coming back too. I think there's going to be a ton of defensive attention on other people like Filipowski, Roach, Proctor. So I think there's going to be a big opportunity for him.
no doubt. I think hit on one of my other storylines here that we're going to talk about later. I want to talk more about is the Duke backcourt, but I think
Yeah.
Jared McCain, especially, just a guy I had a little bit lower, and I think he's got a chance to be a two and done type guy. Coming back another year. But I think he's just going to be a guy that's super tough to keep off the floor with. Like, he has one of those games among like the top 15, 20 guys we had in the class like last year. Has
Mm-hmm.
one of those games. It's like kind of a seamless fit, whether he's the dude or he's playing off of other dudes. Like, there's no worries about how he's going to fit in my opinion. So, yeah, I think he's definitely going to be tough to keep off the floor. My question is like, is the volume there? Is the ceiling high enough for NBA scouts to like kind of bite on that this early? I think there's a chance, but intrigued to see how it all plays out there.
Definitely.
12th overall here, gonna go with Alex Sarr, a guy that is kind of a big upside bet. He's been intriguing for a few years, been a guy that's on the radar coming out of France. He's like a 7'1", super athletic, big guy. Obviously question marks with just like how he is in traffic, how he is playing around the paint, but has good shot blocking instincts, like has all of the tools. Like, I don't know if we're going to talk about 𝘿, but another guy like 𝘿, where it's like the tools aren't a question. He can shoot it, can handle the ball a little bit, can really block shots. It's just about the consistency. It's about the motor, the toughness, the physicality. But Alex Sarr is a guy that I'm pretty intrigued by. He's playing over in the NBL with, I believe it's Perth, if I'm correct. But super talented guy originally from France.
For sure. I'm excited to see what he can do.
Totally. And obviously could be a storyline of ours as well, but the talent over in the NBL is going to be really interesting to see how it plays out.
Definitely.
Moving to number 13 here.
13. So I was thinking, I'm stuck between a couple of guys, but someone I really like who's coming back to school is Riley Kugel at Florida. Um, I liked him a lot in high school, honestly. I always thought he was pretty undervalued, underrated. He's a guy who just honestly impacts the game in so many ways, plays hard, really, really bouncy athlete, and I think there's still some more upside with him. I think he's made some growth as a shooter as well. Obviously, there's still room to improve those percentages, but I think there's a ton to like with him long term.
Yeah, I think that's a great one. Like you said, I was kind of leading that charge late in high school. I loved him. He was from
Yeah.
Mississippi State at that time, and
Hmm.
that Mississippi State staff turned over. I believe actually right before it was the City of Palms, his senior year, playing with Dr. Phillips.
Hmm.
Exploded, like was unbelievable there. And from then, like he was a guy who was ranked around the 150s, sometimes even
Yeah.
out of it. And the
Crazy.
guy that like I know we were super high on, one of my favorite guys coming out of that class, and a guy last year going into the offseason that I was like, this is a potential one and done guy. Um,
Hmm.
and took some time to settle in, but finished
Definitely.
like scorching hot and is one of the guys that's like most talked about as a big potential leap guy this year. So
For sure.
definitely very excited about him and fits that NBA mold of like a combo guard that can really score,
Hmm.
can defend, doesn't need the ball in his hands, but can do it when he's asked to, and can really defend as well, finish around the rim. So yeah, I think that's a great one. Rounding out the lottery here, got a few guys trying to decide between, but I think I'm going to go with Caleb Foster and stay in that Duke backcourt. A guy that's been streaky at times throughout his high school career, went coast to coast, finished his high school career in California, playing with Dusty Stromer at Notre Dame. Guy that's been a bit streaky, like I mentioned, but really, really liked how he finished his high school career EYBL wise. Obviously, was great with Notre Dame that year, but thought he was great and kind of overlooked with Team Thad, his final EYBL season. Just kind of started to figure out the efficiency and the decision making stuff. Another guy that's a little bit of a more creator bet than like a secondary like role player guy. But think he's got great feel, good decision maker, good blend of like the scoring and playmaking stuff. Has a great frame, and I think he's kind of the X factor in that Duke backcourt of like him and Proctor kind of both need the ball, and Jeremy Roach is a guy that's going to play. And we just talked about Jared McCain, who's going to be tough to keep off the floor. So it's like I don't know how that's going to all play out, but yeah, I think if Caleb Foster, whether it's this year or next year, I think once he gets the opportunity to play a little bit more with the ball in his hands, I think some things are gonna kind of figure itself out there.
For sure. I like him a lot too. I thought he was robbed from McDonald's.
Yeah, totally. Just before we move on to the next one, do you have a few guys here, whether it's we don't need to go in deep on them, but a few guys that just fell out on the fringes of your lottery?
Yeah, there's definitely a couple. One was Donovan Clingan at UConn. I know I already mentioned Stephon Castle, but the per 40 numbers with him were just absolutely ridiculous last year. And the thing was he was playing behind Sonogo too. And I think obviously, he's not the most mobile. There's more he needs to improve defending laterally. There's still some stuff to work on, but I think overall just the value, two-way value he provides on the interior is just on it's just really undervalued, I feel like. He's a great screener, plays above the rim when he needs to, good lob threat, block shots, rebounds almost everything. So I think he's a guy that could end up going out of school this year for sure.
Totally. Yeah, I think there's a few big ones we didn't mention. I think that's a big one for sure. And I think the success of a guy like Walker Kessler comes to mind. It's like if he can succeed in the NBA and do everything that he's doing and really defend the rim at
Hmm.
his size, I think Klingon kind of makes a little bit more sense for NBA scouts. I think the questions are pretty clear cut. Does he needs to add things to his game and just continue in that progression physically? But guy that I think is going to be super productive this year.
For sure.
For me, I think the big one we didn't mention is Justin Edwards, and I think we both have
Yeah,
questions on him and a guy that's pegged at like the top overall spot by a lot of people. I think for me, it's like, how does Kentucky? We've heard a lot of different questions about how Kentucky's going to shift and do different things, but I think with that wing spot, I'm really interested to see how that plays out. I'm just intrigued to see like how he gets his offense, to be honest. But has that idea of like a versatile guy that can pass, dribble, shoot, defend. He's got to get stronger. But I think we both understand the intrigue there. Just have questions about like how it's all going to play out in this year one. What do you think on him?
definitely. I agree with you there. You hit the hammer on the nail with saying just like the limitations that we have. But I mean, obviously, we do see the upside. But like you said, I mean, a big question with me is just I feel like he's always been somewhat of a reliant on athleticism guy. So I think playing against in one of, if not the most physical conference in all of college basketball may be a little tough for him at first, but I think there's obviously some upside there. There's going to be playing time, obvious big playing time from the jump on the wing. And another guy I actually was thinking about mentioning that class as well is DJ Wagner. I mean, he's just a proven winner, guy that's just wired to score. I think he is going to really have a big opportunity to take the keys from the jump from Coach Cal.
Yeah, kind of slipped my mind here that he fell out of the lottery, but a guy that I actually do like a ton.
Mhm.
I think getting stronger is kind of the big question mark with him. Like I
For
think
sure.
his physicality is going to be a big question mark just in terms of fitting in the NBA. He's pretty wiry, doesn't have a lot of strength like his lower body and his core, but I think he's going to be really good, honestly. I think he's got a pretty high floor to him just as like a athletic slasher, can really finish around the rim even without like his tools and the strength. He's a guy that's really creative at the rim and produced it every step of the way. So
Mhm.
obviously has his question marks there, but I think he's going to be really good and has all the opportunity to jump into this territory. Um,
Definitely.
Few other guys that were just on the fringes for me. Obviously, Tyrese Proctor, we talked about. Cody Williams, I think, is going to be a guy that's heavily watched in Colorado on a Colorado team that has a few other prospects as well. But I think he's got the upside to be like a two-way, like complementary wing. I think the upside and the primary stuff can sometimes be over-indexed a little bit, but definitely a super talented guy. Really knows how to play off of others and can defend and has upside as he gets stronger. Then Xavier Booker and Elliot Cadeau are the other two. Xavier Booker just going to a loaded Michigan State team and a guy that's been tabbed as a little bit of more of a long-term guy regardless. So I think it could take some time to settle in and kind of carve out a role there. But as like a 6'11" guy that can defend the rim in rotation, can knock down shots, can handle the ball a little bit, has great hands. So he's definitely interesting. And then Elliot Cadeau, obviously another guy that has all the skill in the world, big time feel for the game, but just being an undersized point guard, I think there's questions. The shooting's been a question at times, but it's something that he's gotten a lot better with. So intrigued to see how that North Carolina backcourt plays out, but a guy that's regardless going to be super tough to keep off the floor.
For sure. Agree with you. Those are two good guys to have there.
Okay, so moving on here after the lottery, I want to talk about just some freshmen we think are going to exceed expectations, whether it's looking at their ranking, whether it's looking into this year, just guys that we think are heading to really nice fits. Want to talk about some guys, don't have to be draft guys at all, just some guys that we think are going to exceed expectations and surprise some people.
For sure.
So go ahead with your first one. Who you got?
First to start, I'm gonna go with Aiden Holloway. At Auburn. Obviously, undersized guard, so that's tough. There's some size limitations, but I really just think that's honestly a seamless fit for him. Bruce Pearl, obviously, he lets his guards play, like Sharif Cooper, another undersized guard who thrived there. Jared Harper. I mean, the list goes on for them, but he he really just the shot making is the one thing that pops with him. He's just filled with flair, extensive touch, and I think that he really has a chance to make a big impact early on for them.
Yeah, I think that's a great one. And obviously riding some momentum, a guy who really produced at the back end of his high school career, riding some momentum into like I just mentioned fit, like a perfect hand in glove fit, headed to Auburn. They've had success with small guards and
Mm-hmm.
a guy that's gonna have the ball in his hands pretty quickly there.
Definitely.
My first one, gonna keep it in the SEC, keep it in the backcourt as well. I'm gonna go with Layden Blocker. Obviously, Arkansas, Musselman fashion, they're going to bring in a ton of freshmen, a ton of transfers, excuse me, and a number of those are backcourt guards. So he's going to be a guy that might not have the most opportunity, but a guy that I just like want to bet on. If you've seen him up close, you've seen him play it's like a bunch, and just a guy that plays with such impressive intensity and toughness and the defense, the athleticism, just a guy that I want to bet on, to be honest. And I think playing for Musselman's a great fit. Another guy that could take some time to just carve out a role, but I think he's going to be a fan favorite. He's going to make plays, like a guy that's not going to come in and float. So excited to see more of him.
Definitely, that's a great one as well.
For your second one,
I'm gonna go with Gavin Griffiths here. Kid I was pretty familiar with coming out of high school. I think he's one of the best shooters in the entire 2023 class, and I think that I know Rutgers lost one of their best players in Cam Spencer, who went to UConn. So I think there's a big wing and shoot like shot making need there. So I think that he's gonna have a good opportunity from the jump, and just with his overall shot making approach. He's really, I think he's grown a lot as a processor and as a playmaker as well. He's shown some more flashes in that area. So he's a guy I think that can really um, maybe even make some draft noise in his first year or two as well.
Yeah, definitely. And something that we've talked a little bit about, you can bring it into the mix here is just non-McDonald's All-Americans, one and done
Mhm.
potential guys. I think some
Yeah,
of the top guys, we talk about 𝘿evelopment, we talk about 𝘿evelopment. I think Gavin Griffiths is a guy that can definitely fit into that mix if things go right. But yeah, like probably the top shot maker in this 2023 high school class. So like when you have that and you have 6'6", and you have a really high skill level, good feel for the game, I think you got the opportunity to make things happen, especially if the opportunity is there for him at Rutgers.
for
One
sure.
for me here, got two kind of guys I want to hit on quick, but Amani Hansberry headed to Illinois, a guy that has produced every step of the way. The big thing with his fit, just as the guys ahead of him, he's not going to have the easiest road to playing time early on, but had a nice foreign trip. He settled in well. He's continued to progress physically. So I think a guy that like on paper it might not make much sense just in terms of him getting on the court and carving out playing time, but a guy that I think is just going to be super tough to keep out of the rotation with how productive he is, how smart he is, how tough he is. So I think that's just one that I don't think he's a draft guy this early on, but a guy that's going to surpass some expectations and like a Illinois roster that's really focused on the returning guys. I think he's one guy coming in that could surpass what people think. And the other one for me is going back to Baylor's Miro Little. I think he's just going to be really good, really solid, like a guy that's proven he can scale up and down, handle the ball a little bit more, but also is kind of at his best as like a secondary guy who can make shots, make decisions, handle the ball a little bit and make a play for someone else. Also, pretty solid defender and has the physicality and the frame to like settle in rather quickly in Baylor. Um, yeah, those are two other big ones for me. How about you?
Definitely. Another guy I'm going to go with also falls into that non-McDonald's All-American categories. Cohen Carr, sticking in the Big Ten like Monty Hansberry here, but he's a guy who obviously has a ways to go development-wise, skill set-wise, but just the athleticism is ridiculous, and how hard he plays, his defensive playmaking, he's just a true fast break igniter, thrives in the open floor. I mean, there was one clip in the NIBC this past year where he made a skip pass, turned it over. The guy probably had like 10 steps on him. He made maybe 3 or 4 strides, pinned it off the glass. It was ridiculous. And I just think he's a guy that's going to thrive playing for Izzo. I mean, he's going to play hard, give 100% every night. So he's a guy I really think could, just whether it's hustle plays, fast break finishes, I think he's just going to make an impact for them, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think he's a guy that's also going to make some draft noise, just being
Hmm.
the best athlete in the class. Like it's just going to happen. I think for him, making shots is probably the biggest thing. If he can make
Definitely.
shots at like a decent clip, I think things are going to go pretty well for him. But also might take time. They got a lot of bodies. Like they're deep with ton of talent. So
Mhm.
I'm interested to see how that play time shakes out. But a guy that like when you see him for the first, it's not going to take people very long to see like, okay, he's got a lot of stuff to him.
Yeah, could definitely end up a fan favorite for sure.
Yeah, no doubt. Just want to run through some guys real quick. Miles Colvin, keeping in the Big Ten, one of my favorite guys in the class, has been overlooked. Has a game that really fits at the highest level, I think, and also just talked about Cohen Carr. Miles Colvin is one of the best athletes in this freshman class that just people don't know a ton of. Obviously, Purdue takes a little bit more time, just with getting guys to where they need to be draft wise, but a guy that has all the tools to be an NBA player down the line. Jacob McFarland in Houston, I think he's going to be an interesting one. Just rim runner who can shoot it a little bit. Got to get way stronger, but think he's an interesting one. Trey Green at Xavier, just think he's going to be an incredible college player. Obviously, they
Yeah.
have some guards coming in, but I think he's going to be incredible. And if he gets the opportunity, I think he's going to be a fan favorite, be a guy that coaches are going to love. So I think that's a big one. Mo Diabate at Alabama. Alabama's freshman class is going to be fascinating. Mo Diabate is dealing Dealt with some injuries here in the preseason, I know, but if he gets the opportunity, super physical, a guy that just like fits the Nate Oates mold really well, in my opinion. Deaton Thomas headed to UNLV.
Mhm.
Guy who's going to get the ball in his hands. Think he's going to put up big numbers. Super skilled, really good in the pick and roll. Smaller guard, but I think he's going to be fantastic there. And then a little bit of a sleeper one. I want to talk about Jordan Dumont at Villanova. He's gotten some buzz recently. Played well in FIFA. 6'7", 6'8" wing that can shoot it. He's got good feel. Been overlooked recruiting wise, but I think he's going to be pretty interesting. I know Villanova was maybe his only high major offer when it came down to it, but Canadian national, played high school basketball in Houston, has like the prototypical wing size you look for. So I think he's an interesting one headed to Nova.
For sure, he's a good one.
Yeah. So just to round out here, I want to talk about some intriguing freshman storylines. I know we've talked about a few, so we're not going to go too much more into my two of mine were the UCLA freshmen in the Duke backcourt, which we're already going through a bunch. So any that jump out to you?
Quick one I wanted to jump on. I know we touched on it briefly, was just G League Ignites. I know it's obviously not in the college realm, but I mean, they finished with, I think, four guys who were top 20 in our 2023 rankings. We already touched on Ron Holland, Matas Buzelis, and a few other guys, but I just thought it was interesting, like you talked about as well. It's just like the mold of wings they brought in, and just how it's going to be interesting to see how that works, how it works for each guy specifically, how it affects their development, their trajectory, and whatnot. But I'm really intrigued to see that. Another one I know we also touched on briefly was UConn's class. They're just completely loaded up and down, bringing a ton of guys, also bring back returners like we mentioned earlier. A guy I wanted to mention in that class who I think could turn some heads. I know you're high on him as well as Jalen Stewart.
God,
I absolutely loved him in EYBL with Rotary his junior year. I thought he was highly efficient. I mean, he's just a mismatch nightmare who can really get buckets from all three levels. And I think he could really become like a very good role player guy that really impacts each game off the bench for them.
yeah, big Jalen Stewart fan. I don't know if it's going to be this year just because the roster.
Hmm.
I think he's awesome. Like, think it was a good fit for him. Physical four-man, can really generate mismatches, can make shots out of the mid-range. I think um, expanding his range out to the three-point line consistently is the big thing, but like has a ton that I love just in terms of a mismatch, big wing type guy. And going back to your first point with G League Ignite, a guy that I had at 14th overall in the big board, but kind of got pushed down because we had a lot of guys ahead of him that kind of fell to me. But Thierry Darlan's one of my favorite guys in the class. Been high on him for a long time. NBA Africa kid, 6'7" wing, really athletic. Dealt with some injuries these last few months. Seems like he's healthy now. But a guy that I think is going to take some time to settle in. Isn't really used to the half court basketball stuff. Doesn't really have anything to lean on there. But I think he's fascinating, just as like a two-way guy who can handle the ball and make plays for others, can really get to the rim. So that's just another guy. And then rounding out this conversation, had three storylines. It was the UCLA freshman, Duke backcourt. The one that I think is interesting is the redshirt freshman guys. Two coming to mind. I know there's more, but it's Freddie DeLeon and then Davin Cosby. I think two
Mm.
guys that could very much fit into the draft picture if things play right for them. Alabama, we mentioned a little bit. Davin Cosby is like a ton of that two-way wing upside. Love his defense, can really make shots. And I think that few months playing in that practicing with those Alabama guys, obviously big time Alabama culture just in terms of how they practice, how they work. So I think he could be a guy that surprises some people. Obviously, if Rylan Griffin and a bunch of other guys ahead of just have that already have some draft buzz, but I think he's going to be like a guy that surprises some people. Intrigued to see if he carves out a role. And then Freddie DeLeon is like another one of those primary creator bets. And I think if things fall into place for him, is very much like could be a draft guy. Shooting's a little bit of a question. Guy that has been used to having the ball in his hands, but I think has all the upside to really surprise some people this year at Tennessee.
Yeah, definitely. He got a lot of buzz this summer. He played really well with USA as well.
Yeah, I think he's got a ton of opportunity to surprise a lot of people and open eyes. But Appreciate you coming on. Loved having this conversation. Obviously, a 2023 class that doesn't have a ton of hype right now. Not a lot of people excited about it, but I think there are a lot of guys that we tried to hit on here that are fascinating. And if things fall into place for a lot of different guys, even didn't mention, but like Wesley Yates and a ton of other guys in this class that have the upside to get there if things break right. So appreciate you coming on again. We'll definitely have to do it again here soon.
Of course. Thanks for having me, man.
Thank you.